name is Annette Disjardin. I'm an ongoing worker with the Kenosha County DCFS. I've been employed there for a little over 2 years, but I've been working with children and families for approximately nine years in total. I'm going to present a case that has came from the initial assessment process. The case I will share discusses the journey of a family from the beginning of the investigations to the court process. The case I am about to share was transferred from our CPS unit from Worker Smith in 2012. Worker Smith substantiated neglect to two young children. At this time, their ages, Jenny, she was 3 years of age, and Jessica, 2 years of age, by their mother, Kim Jones. During the case transfer from CPS Worker Smith, he informed me that the girls were removed from their mother's care after being found unsupervised outside the family's household holding syringe needles. During the investigation by law enforcement, investigators and CPS determined that the needles came from the inside of the family home. The home was Kim's mom's, and it was extremely filthy and in deplorable conditions, with a large number of drug paraphernalia throughout the home. When officers arrived to the home, Kim was observed to be in an unconscious state, later admitting to being under the influence of intoxicants. Due to the serious safety concerns, a petition was filed with our juvenile court office, and a determination to remove the children was made by Worker Smith. Both Jenny and Jessica were placed with their paternal grandmother due to their father, Seb, being incarcerated, and Kim's pervasive drug use, erratic lifestyle, and homelessness being of concern for children to remain in their care. Since both children were placed in a relative placement, a referral to the grandmother to become a licensed foster parent was generated and sent to Professional Services Group Community Impact Programs, as well as a referral for kinship support. The girl's grandmother obtained a kinship payment to help aid in the costs to support and caring for the children. Once I received the case, I sat down and met with Kim at the department and completed an interview that obtained background information regarding her upbringing and what led to the current situation. During this interview, Kim was very upset, scared, and expressed how much she loved and cared for her children. Kim had no prior involvement with DCFS, however, was on juvenile orders as a teenager. Kim expressed having a very rough childhood as she grew up around drugs. During this conversation, I found out that Kim even began abusing drugs at a young age of 12. She stated she had access to drugs at such a young age because her mom and dad used to smoke marijuana and snort cocaine. Learning about Kim's extensive use of marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and prescription pills, I knew Kim was in need of some intensive drug treatment services. As Kim continued to share information with me during the dispositional interview, I began assessing the service needs for her and her children. Kim dropped out of school when she was a junior, was homeless, living with friends, and shortly became pregnant with her first child, Jenny. At the age of 17, Kim became a teenage mother. Again, after obtaining a substantial amount of information from Kim, I proceeded to gather all the information and complete a court report for the dispositional hearing. The dispositional hearing is sort of like the sentencing hearing for our juvenile court process. At this hearing, the judge reviewed the report I wrote that specified why both Jenny and Jessica were in need of protection and services, which placed both children on supervision with Kenosha County. Conditions, known as conditions of return, were issued to both parents at this time. These conditions are a set of objectives the parents must complete and comply with to ensure safety and stability before children are able to return home. Some conditions relative to this case included obtaining and maintaining a safe and stable living environment, meaning Kim needed to make sure that she was able to obtain her own residence. She needed to have financial means to care for her children. She needed employment. Comply with services, submit to random UAs, adhere to visitation, complete a parenting course, complete a drug assessment, and comply with drug therapeutic services. Since Seb was incarcerated, additional conditions for parents who are incarcerated were also applied. These conditions require the incarcerated parent to keep in contact with the division, write to their children, and adhere to visitation rules, and continue engaging in the case process during their incarceration. Part of our worker's role after the dispositional hearing is helping provide services to the family to help them meet their conditions to aid in the reunification of their children. Because I knew Kim was struggling with sobriety, I placed her on a color system, which required her to have to call our health department, which is located at the job center, every morning. If her color was called that day, she was required to come to the job center between the hours of 8 in the morning to 6 p.m. to submit a UA that would be observed by one of the nurses. I also refer Kim to AODA services consisting of individual therapy at Oakwood here in Kenosha, a support group known as the Teresa Group, which is ran by Sandra Malone and is designed to help support mothers with addictions to gain sobriety. Because the children were placed out of Kim's care and she was still struggling to gain sobriety, a referral to Children's Hospital Community Services was made to allow Kim to have supervised contact with her 2 daughters. These visits took place at the visitation facility where Kim and her 2 daughters were assigned to a very small room to visit. During the beginning, visits were supervised, which meant that there was a worker in the room observing everything Kim and her children were doing while documenting their interactions. These interactions are then provided to myself and also provided to the guardian ad litem, who is the attorney that's assigned to the children because of their young age. 6 months after the dispositional hearing, a permanency review hearing was scheduled and held at the courthouse. Prior to this hearing, I had to create the permanency documents for each child, which consisted of the parents' progress in meeting their conditions, as well as the children's progress. Because Kim was working with the division and the children were only out of the home for 6 months, a goal to reunify the children was accepted by the courts. At this time, both parents were reminded about compliance, and they were read what's known as termination of parental right warnings, which are read to all parents whose children are out of their care. At the end of this hearing, an additional 6-month hearing date was selected and services continued. Although both girls seemed to be doing very well in the home of their paternal grandmother, the grandmother became non-compliant with visits, and after about 11 months into this case, the girls were removed from the grandmother's care and placed in separate foster homes. This occurred because the grandmother was failing to comply with visitation, which could hinder progress towards reunification, and she also didn't meet the requirements to become a licensed foster parent. Unfortunately, despite a call to CIP to contact numerous foster parents in our community, a foster home for both adorable little girls at this time aged 4 and 3 to remain together was unavailable. Because Kim was working on her conditions and visitation was important to keep the children, it was vital to keep the children here in our community. This was very traumatic for Jenny and Jessica, as they had always resided together and wanted to not only be with each other, they wanted to be home. Because of this tough move, a referral for the children to begin therapy was made, and both children began therapy at a therapeutic service provider here located in Kenosha. During this time, Jenny began 4K and was starting to misbehave at school. She was having random temper tantrums and would have a really hard time getting dropped off. This became very concerning for the foster parent and the school. Jenny needed more intensive support, so I completed a referral to a program called Foster Parent Support, which is a contracted program with PSG. This support program assigned a worker to meet with Jenny and her foster parent weekly, sometimes twice a week. The worker would go into the home and engage Jenny in play therapy, and would also address any concerns or questions the foster parent had. The second permanency hearing was held a year after disposition. The court again reviewed the plans it wrote that expressed the progress the parents were making towards reunification. At this time, since both children were in foster care, the foster parents were encouraged to attend the hearings so they would be able to become more familiar with the court process and understand the requirements needed for a safe and successful reunification. Jenny and Jessica's foster parents were very helpful and supportive and remained very hopeful that one day Jenny, Jessica, and Kim would reunify. Jessica, being a little younger, wasn't as aggressive, but became very clingy to Kim and never wanted to end visits with her. She often cried after visits, making it hard for Kim to say goodbye. Kim was always very loving and affectionate towards her children. However, she was still struggling to gain sobriety. At this time, a referral was made to Children's Hospital of Wisconsin for a service known as Project Home. This service provides the division worker with additional case management aid and assists in meeting with clients on a weekly basis to review those conditions of return and help assist in additional service recommendations as deemed appropriate. With the help of Project Home and continued case management, monitoring of Kim's sobriety, Kim became more committed to her sobriety and progress towards her conditions. Because of the positive progress, visits moved from supervised to monitored, which meant a worker no longer needed to be in the room with Kim all the time during the visits, but would check on them at random moments. Because no case is alike, there is no set guide for the time frame and how visits progress, but in Kim's case, she was able to go from supervised to monitored visits to home visits in 15 months' time. At this time, I referred this case to a program we utilize known as IAP, which is Intensive Aftercare Programming, to complete random safety checks daily at the home of Kim's grandfather during the visitation. Kim was residing with her grandfather at this time. Kim continued to attend weekly AODA therapy sessions along with weekly attendance to the Teresa group, was submitting clean UAs, meeting with me on a regular basis, complying with services, maintained employment with a temp agency, and was attending to her children's needs. With these conditions being met, a trial reunification request was filed with the court asking that the children be able to go home to Kim on a trial basis. A trial reunification allows us to send children home on a trial basis, meaning their placement, so their foster home, stays open in the case the trial does not succeed. This order was granted and a trial reunification allowing us to monitor the transition of the girls home went into effect for 90 days. During this time, IAP, Project Home, myself, Central Alone, continued working with Kim to monitor her sobriety and oversee the safety of the children in her care. Kim's grandfather, who was also residing in the home, was also able to aid in the supervision of Kim and her children. The children were very happy to be home and were always very affectionate. However, this was a traumatic experience for both girls, and Jenny was continuing to exhibit concerning behaviors at school, and Jessica still had a very hard time letting Kim leave. After a referral to CAFASI, family support program was made, which provided additional in-home services to Kim and helping her parent the children. The service was going into the home twice, 3 times a week to help provide that parenting support and model to Kim what she could do to help her children during this process. After 90 days of continued monitoring of the trial reunification, a court hearing was requested, and a change to the dispositional order allowing the children to return home to their mother's care was granted. This petition also granted supervision to allow Kim and the children to stay under care with Kenosha County and oversee the progress for 6 months. Kim and her grandfather continued to get along very well. He was very supportive of Kim, Jenny, and Jessica, and encouraged Kim to do whatever it took for her to keep her children in her care. He encouraged her to obtain her HSED, which she did. And during the 6 months of supervision, I continued to meet with Kim regularly, went to her home twice a month to visit with the girls. I have continued to complete random safety checks, and services continued to work with Kim and the girls. Kim was very honest about how she felt at times to use, but she was able to utilize the supports to veer her from relapse. Kim worked very hard to reunify with her children and never gave up. Although there were some bumps in the road of her sobriety, she took responsibility for her actions and was trusting of the services she had in place. She was able to successfully close her case with division after 2 years of intensive case management. Since Kim's case has closed, there have been no further referrals regarding Kim and her children.